Today's guest is Liz Brooks, a PR strategist with agency experience at some of the world's leading firms. She now works at Interview Valet, helping C-suite executives build authority. Today, she's sharing why podcast interviews belong in your PR strategy and how visibility on the right podcast platforms moves the needle on helping you become a category of one. Liz, thank you so much for being on the Create Brand Envy podcast.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And you're joining me all the way from Los Angeles.
Yep, sunny California. It's already over 80 degrees today.
Yeah, well, I'm in sunny Florida, and let me see if on my computer I can see what the temperature is. But it's more than 80, so I know it might feel hot to you, so consider yourself
well,
lucky.
You have the humidity as well, so yeah, it's a compounded effect.
Yes. And so I was looking at your, your work history, and I saw that you worked for OkCupid at some point and some other major brands.
They were one of my clients. Yeah. So I worked. I started in traditional PR, working with a lot of the larger global agencies. I was in Silicon Valley at the time, so I worked with a lot of. I don't want to say who my clients are. I did sign some NDAs back in the day, but a lot of blue chip clients that you would recognize. Some of those larger names. And then, I started with podcasting. I was always kind of an early adopter, so I started integrating that into our thought leadership strategies, with a lot of the campaigns that I was working at. And I started owning those projects. And then a few years later, when it was time for me to, leave the traditional PR agency life, I kind of began dedicating myself specifically to podcast interview marketing, and that is where I am today.
So now you're with Interview Valet, and
Correct.
I think I have like some 40-something odd episodes. I believe when I celebrated my first year, I did a celebratory episode with Fingers, our producer, celebrating our 1-year anniversary, and I talked specifically about how I every guest I have personally vetted, and I just don't let anybody on the show. And today, fast forward, maybe 2 or 3 years after that, I have had guests exclusively from Interview Valet, despite receiving multiple guest requests from other people. And it is because you guys actually have some really good substantive guests that have, really valuable information to share. And I can attest that you guys are really easy to work with as a podcaster. So I really appreciate you guys for sending a few really good guests our way.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, I think we are also particular with who we work with. We want to make sure that we're working with somebody who actually has a story to tell and something to say versus just trying to blindly grow their brand. And we do work with them specifically so that they don't do that. We help them with materials and strategy and storytelling. And, our purpose is to make things as smooth as possible for both the guest and the host. So we love getting that feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a PR component. So when I went to USF, the University of South Florida, not the University of San Francisco, I remember being, a very young, mass communication student, and they were asking me to choose either the PR track or the advertising track. And the big thing that I remember when I was evaluating this decision in my head, I remember our PR teacher, PR 101 saying, the big difference between PR and advertising is that in advertising, you pay to play. You shell out some money and you can pick where you want to be, and you can pick the size or the amount of time that your ad's going to be, and you can say exactly whatever you want to say and it's guaranteed. Or you can pick the PR track, and in the PR track, you're basically, doing, you're coming up with a strategy and you're doing efforts, you're building relationship with media outlets, and you're, trying to build that story, and then you're pitching the story and trying to convince all these media outlets to take on the story and actually feature your client. And it is not guaranteed that your work is going to produce any results. And I remember sitting there going, you know what, I'm going to go the paid route. Like I want to know that what the work I'm going to do is going to produce results for my clients, and I'm going to see the fruits of my labor. And I remember my whole life, I remember thinking PR sounds fabulous, but I don't like this whole like hope and see if it works kind of thing. Would you agree? I mean, things have
Oh,
changed dramatically
absolutely.
since, 20 years ago, but
I mean, as you were describing the difference in between the two, I was like, it is a lot. It is so much more involved with PR, and at the end of the day, it's not paid placements, right? So you're hoping that you get the right coverage on the right outlets, but it is never guaranteed. And that I think that's something that is very misunderstood by people who are new to PR, who work with agencies. They're expecting that they're going to get on XYZ placements. And a lot of it's not just also on us, but it's on the value of the content that they have. We can do everything under the sun, but ultimately, if they don't have the right story to share, the right angle, we're not going to be able to get them on those outlets. And you're right, anybody can buy a media placement or run an ad. And something that I like about podcasting, specifically integrating that into your PR strategy, is you can't buy a 45-minute conversation where you're demonstrating expertise in real time. That doesn't happen in traditional PR with ads, it can. But yeah, I think that's what separates authority from advertising a little bit when you're working with PR and podcasting.
absolutely. And there's that credibility factor where it's like you can't pay me to have a guest that I don't really like what they're selling, or I don't like their persona. Like you said, on the PR side, there has to truly be what would you say from just a global PR perspective? What are the qualities of that guest or that persona that need to exist in order for you to say like, okay, I've got something, I can run with it?
I think first of all, there has to be a problem that you're solving. You have to be able to explain how you solve that problem, what differentiates you from other people who are trying to solve that problem. I think that's a little bit of, trying to become that category of one where you're not going to be compared to other competitors. You are the go-to.
So as a PR expert, when is it that somebody should consider adding podcasts to their marketing strategy media mix?
I think it's when you're ready to start building your personal brand in addition to your brand overall. I think PR gets you third-party validation, right? But podcasting is going to get you more time and intimacy. So together, they solve two things that brands struggle with the most, which I think is being both trusted and being known. So when you're, I guess, trying to set yourself apart from competitors and build more authority and trust, that is probably when it's going to be the best time to start considering podcasting as part of your overall PR strategy.
I think in the past it was just standard to brand the business,
Right.
and the corporation, and then I think all the leaders and all the people involved were kind of like these behind the scenes type thing. And I think
Right.
now with the internet, it is so important for you to maintain and uphold your own personal branding as a professional, quite honestly, at any level. Even if you're a college student or you're a director or owner or whatever, your online persona, your personal branding now is huge. It's a huge component of your career success.
Absolutely. A press hit, an article tells people who you are. An interview is going to show them how you think, which is a different kind of trust, and that's the kind of trust that converts. It's also why, if you're looking for a new role or something like that they're not just going to go to your resume. They're going to go to your LinkedIn. They're going to see what you post. They're going to see if you've been on podcasts before, how you present yourself. And that's the same, when you're trying to find new leads or get new clients. Ultimately, if I'm looking at two different products, but I recognize one, or, I like the person, I'm going to go with that one ultimately, right? So I think that's a big part of building your personal brand to ultimately, help the brand of your company or your product as well, because you cannot be replaced. That's going to help set you apart ultimately.
And when I think of that, I immediately am thinking, well, I started my own podcast. Like, what would you say about like the advantages or disadvantages? Of course, I could outline them, but from your perspective of a client saying like, I just want to start my own podcast versus I just want to be a guest on other people's podcasts?
I think both are very valuable. However, I think that when you're a guest on other people's podcasts, you are also, first of all, you're reaching different folks, right? You're reaching different audiences. It can be the same as yours. There can be some overlap into new verticals that you hadn't considered potentially. And then also you're borrowing that host's authority as well. Like you said, you don't just have anybody on. So if you're guesting on someone else's podcast, that's because they see value in your message and they want to have you on because they think that you're going to deliver value to their listeners, which is different from just starting your own podcast because I hate to say it, but it is so accessible now. Anybody can start a podcast. There's hundreds of thousands of them out there, but not all of them are listened to. But I do think ultimately, both can be very important. But that is, I think, the difference in between hosting your own versus going on other ones. And then it also just, back to building your digital library, if you're repurposing these interviews, if the host is tagging you, you're building, not only are you networking, but you're building more backlinks and more ways to make yourself discoverable through SEO and AI platforms, which is so important now.
Yep, absolutely. More and more people are using AI. And, at first it was, as a marketer, it was kind of like, well, what does this mean for SEO and Google search and whatnot? And, I was actually very relieved to find that, like, the answer in and it was from Greg Brooks, which was one of the guests that you guys sent me over I think it was like last year or a year and a half ago, very early on when this was coming along.
Yep.
And he basically was saying, like, the same practices, like, basically you go back to the basics. It's like, as long as you continue to be a good company, right, or be a good person, right, like a professional in your field, you leave these breadcrumbs online, whether it be backlinks or content that you're producing or reviews that people are leaving to you. And all AI is doing is, before, Google maybe had a hard time really scraping all that together effectively, and AI just basically can lasso all of that and paint a really, really good picture to the prompter of who you are. I mean, I use AI to prepare sometimes for guests or before I meet somebody, because it can kind of go and scrape the internet for me and give me all these resource links that I can just click through. So I think you have more control than ever on how people perceive you as a professional. If you play your cards right, you have a lot of control over that nowadays.
Definitely. And first of all, I love a good Brooks. I remember Greg. He's great. But no, you did actually recently do an episode asking, whether AI is changing how authority gets recognized online. And going back to podcast guesting, I think it's one of the more concrete ways to answer that, because it's one of the PR tactics that produces content built for exactly that kind of consistent, attributable expertise signals that AI platforms are going to recognize and put in front of eyes, essentially.
Yes, agreed. And yes, having your own podcast is accessible, accessible to virtually anybody. But as somebody
having a good one, though, that's different.
As somebody that's been doing it for several years, I don't think that, just like I don't think everybody can be an entrepreneur, not everybody can sustain a podcast long term. And you're right, not a good one.
No, definitely. That's in the same way that you vet guests and everything, we vet the shows as well. We want to see that it is posting regularly, that it has a good amount of episodes, that it's not brand new. I can talk for days about all the things that go into how we evaluate shows, but that is definitely a part of it.
And that's a compliment, because you guys keep, you guys, like I said, we have a good relationship. You've sent a few guests over, so I appreciate the compliment that you must have evaluated the Create Print Edit podcast is, good enough for your roster. So you mentioned something earlier about, that it's better to think smaller, right, versus being on a big podcast. Like, a lot of times people want to be on like the Joe Rogan show, right?
Oh man. If I had $1 for every time a client came and said that they wanted to be on Joe Rogan, a lot of times it's just because that's also the only show that they know if they're new to podcasting or they're not really familiar with the product. A big part of our strategy and what we educate our guests and our clients on is that, bigger is not better, better is better. I think authority and trust isn't built by being everywhere, you know. It's built by being right consistently in front of the right people. For example, a single well-placed interview on a niche show is often going to outperform a mention in a big outlet because the audience is already primed to care about that topic. I had a client a few years ago. I won't say who they are, but they were in the health and wellness space. They were an AG1 competitor. And first of all, they were going after the wrong audience, and they were going after the wrong shows. So they were trying to get, in front of Zillennials, and they were trying to get on these huge podcasts, and we got them, and they were doing ad placements as well, speaking of advertising. So we were running ads on Bomb Mom and Dave Asprey. They had interviews also on both of those shows. They just weren't getting the conversions that they wanted. We had to do a lot of brainstorming, and ultimately we decided to pivot a little bit, and it was a situation where it was, ask for forgiveness versus, asking for permission. But we started going after, first of all, a different audience. We started going towards an older crowd, like the Wellness Over 40. And we started going towards some of those smaller, more niche shows. And we got a lot of interest. A lot of those shows wanted to have them on. So once I had like a good little handful of invites, I'm like, hey, this isn't resonating. These people want to talk to you. These people see a lot of value in your product. Are you willing to give this a shot? And they did. And I forgot exactly, I think it was Health and Wellness Over 50 that we got them on was the first one. And it was a smaller show in comparison to Bomb Mom and Dave Asprey, what have you. But they saw 40 conversions in the first week after the episode aired. And they were like, oh my God. And so our entire strategy after that pivoted, and we focused on that for the rest of the campaign. And it was a lot more successful, even though different audience, smaller shows, but those people were interested in the product versus, just listening to an advertisement.
Yeah, that's quality over quantity.
Exactly. I always say, as a musician by night, I can play at a farmer's market where there's thousands of people coming in and out over the day, but ultimately they're not there for the music. They're there for the food. They're there for, the vegetables, everything else, what have you. Whereas if I'm playing in a small nightclub at 11 o'clock at night on a Wednesday, first of all, that sucks. But the people who are there, they're already interested in that genre of music. They're there for the music specifically. They're going to be more likely to follow me online, stream my music, etc. Sorry, I got into PR originally through music, so I always go back to that as an example. It's just in my blood. But yeah, again, that just goes back to being in front of the right audience, even if it's smaller. It's more about resonance versus reach, I believe.
Agreed. And that's just, like a basic tenet of, marketing and branding and advertising. People are like, oh, I just want to become a household name. And it's like, no, you don't. You don't want to not everybody is your target audience. Reaching lots of people is great, but if they're not your audience, you're completely wasting your money.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you touched on it briefly. I'm going to touch on it again. When I saw your headshot, I said, oh, you look kind of like a Taylor Swift or like I don't know what other artist, musician I said. And then you told me that you're actually a musician and that was your band cover picture. Mm-hmm. I know everybody wants to know her band is called Sunset Lines and she's
Correct,
on
yes.
Spotify. And so I haven't heard her music yet, but I'm going to. But you can look up Liz Brooks, Sunset Lines on Spotify.
I was not expecting that, but thank you for the shout out.
Of course. I mean, you got to support music. And then look at all the amazing guitars. If you're watching the YouTube version, you can see that she has, what is that, 6 guitars? But that's your husband. Your husband's a guitarist.
Yeah, those are the ones on display too. There's more.
I'm sure there's more.
But all the vintage keyboards are mine. There's also a display case here he has over 100 guitar pedals. I won't even get into it.
That's awesome. And you're the singer-songwriter.
Correct. Yeah.
That's amazing. And then how did your music career, navigate you towards PR?
So back when I was in school, and I was also a comm student, I was actually trying to decide in between. It's funny, I did not consider advertising. I was trying to decide in between PR and HR. Also, at the time, in a band, trying to get myself more recognized, in the San Francisco music scene. So I was paying attention to the local music outlets, basically coming up with like media lists before I even knew what media lists were, and coming up with pitches, trying to get, trying to make our band sound interesting so that they would actually want to come to our show and feature us and take some pictures and write an article, which was really, really hard to do. And yeah, so that is how I started doing it. I started doing it for my own band. And then my husband at the time he was multiple projects. He also had a different side project with a couple of friends. So I started doing it for them. And then eventually I was like, okay, so apparently I'm already doing PR. So I'll go that way. And then when I graduated, I realized but I got to make money off of it. So I'm not going to, unfortunately, I'm not going to stay, within the music scene. And that's when I started working in B2B tech, of all places, and just kind of expanded from there. And now I work with all sorts of clients, authors, health and wellness, B2B, consumer goods. You name it, I've probably worked with them. Nonprofits too.
And as part of being part of Interview Valet and working with, executives that want to augment their personal brand and get on podcasts, do you guys provide any kind of coaching to them about how to, because stepping up to them, I'm not a singer, but I do karaoke, and there is not a single time, no matter how many years I've done karaoke, that I don't step up to the mic and feel that, that adrenaline fear. Right. Do you guys give any coaching, or what's your best practice for?
So for those who are coming to us pretty green, first of all, we want to help develop their story, their angle, who are you trying to reach? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? What differentiates you from others that are solving that problem? Make sure you have a personal connection as well, because you don't want to come off just sounding too salesy or anything like that. I did not mean to talk so much about my music background, but that is a perfect example, right? There's a reason that I got into this. And then we can also do, mock interviews and things like that. We have a lot of tools and resources on suggested intros, how long to try to keep it. You don't want to ramble for too long. You want to make sure also that you're mentioning your calls to action, that you're sending listeners somewhere after the show, because ultimately the interview is just the first part. A lot of people, I think, believe that just going on the interview and having that released, that's the finished product, but that's incorrect. The interview isn't the finish line. It's actually the input. And that interview is going to generate content assets, which get repurposed on LinkedIn and email and everything like that. So it's not just educating guests on how to do the interview itself, but how to use that interview after the fact to actually spread your message, get visibility. We always suggest, one interview should provide at least 1 month's worth of content. So that's part of it as well. There's a lot of education that goes into it from, beginning to end. I do find a lot of our clients that come to us have already at least been on a couple of shows before, so they're not coming in too green. So much of it is just educating guests on what to do with the interview after the fact, actually. And then we also, we listen to the interviews when we go live, and we do interview analysis. This is what you did right. Here's some areas for improvement, giving them tips and tricks on how to do that along the way as well, so that each interview gets better from the last.
Have you evaluated some of the guests that I've had from your, do you know what I mean? From your belly?
No, I saw that you had, I believe it was Sharon Torek that was on recently.
Yeah, Sharon. There was somebody else recently too. He did an AI for reviews. God, I'm forgetting what it's called. We remember search type.
Yeah. These analysis, there's something new that we started doing just a few months ago, actually. So I don't think that any of my clients have been on your show in the past few months where we've run an analysis. But I could go back and find Sharon's and share it with you if you want.
Yeah, I would love to. You know,
Okay.
one of the things that I hate as a podcaster is that I don't really get a lot of feedback. I can see downloads and their numbers, and you know, some do better than others. You know,
Right.
I have a data point on my dashboard that I can't explain, but there was like a month earlier this year, I want to say maybe April, where apparently I got super popular in Brazil, like mega, like went viral in Brazil. I don't know why. I have no idea why. But I mean, and I can sit there and like go through the numbers and like try to, if I really wanted to crack the code, I'm sure I could like find the pattern and be like, this episode. But what
Right.
happens is that people discover one episode and then they start listening to my other episodes, you know?
Yep.
So that's why it's hard for me to really pinpoint what the heck happened. But yeah, like I get like the, you know, these like unbelievable shoot ups where I'm like, Jesus, like, you know, and then other times where, or other episodes where I'm like, yeah, that kind of did a little lukewarm. And as much as I've tried to like create a Facebook group or like encourage listeners to like email, whatever, like they don't do that. They're listening and then they're, you know,
Yeah.
driving and what, you know what I mean? Like I get it. I get it. But listener, if you're listening and you enjoy the podcast, please send me. I am online. Let me know what you think. It would really help. Any kind of feedback's always good.
Completely agree. No, that's funny too. I check like our streaming stats and things like that, and we also like very randomly popular in Singapore. Of
Yes.
all places. And I also cannot explain why. I cannot explain those analytics, unfortunately. But coming back to it and coming back to, you know, like feedback and what makes a show good. And you just said it. So many people are looking specifically at, you know, social media followers and likes and reviews and things like that. And I have to be honest, I listen to so many podcasts, but I barely follow any of them online or do anything like that. And we always tell our guests, like, please, first of all, give us your feedback on the host. And you've probably received our feedback emails after we have a
No.
guest. Like, no,
No.
oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, what is happening? I'm going to have to.
I'm like, oh, I must be doing good because they keep sending me people that are actually good, and I'll take them. Like, you know, I some guests I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, I'm not interested in that. But some guests I'm like, oh, this person seems like a heavy hitter. Like, I've been looking for somebody like this.
I'm going to have to look into why you haven't been receiving those. Yeah, no, after every interview, what is supposed to happen is that we send both our guest, our client, and the host a feedback email asking how the interview went, because, you know, for the same way that we want to make sure that we're continuing to hit the mark for our clients and make sure that we're staying on target and finding the right shows for them, we want to do the same for the hosts that we work with. We want to make sure that the clients, the guests that we're presenting to them,
Yeah.
are quality and continuing to hit the mark on their end as well. That's such an important part, you know, of keeping that relationship. I'm sorry you haven't gotten those.
Well,
They
maybe
might be going to your spam or something like that though,
that's
because
possible.
they don't, like, I don't send those out personally. It comes from our system. It's something that's
That is
that's
if
scheduled, and
it's
so
coming out
they're probably in your
automatically,
junk. Yeah,
they
that
are.
would be my guess.
Almost guarantee you. And I have so much trouble keeping up with just my general inbox that the junk gets looked at a couple times a year.
Nicole, I can't even tell you.
Like, no. And then you know, I recently was able to start cleaning up my Gmail accounts because I guess I noticed they added this thing where I don't have to go individually and unsubscribe. Like I can just unsubscribe from like right there from like my inbox, which
Yeah,
I found fabulous.
with the
And
right click. Yeah.
we recently were traveling, and so you know, when you travel, you have a lot of downtime. You know, in the airplane, you've got
Yeah.
internet connection, but you know, whatever. And so I just started and so like my inbox is finally like more manageable for my personal accounts. But no, email is just like this overwhelming thing. So it's in my junk. But
Yeah.
awesome. So okay, going back to the topic at hand. Sorry, ADD. I I can say that as a host, having a podcast, it's definitely been a differentiator for my company when people are evaluating us. Not everybody has a podcast, and then you know on that client and guest side, like you said, being featured on a podcast, I think it lends medium credibility. I think that podcast, like you said, anybody can do it, so it's a little bit watered down. It's not like when you used to be a guest on, like, ABC Action News or something that was more like, like an official media outlet, or being featured actually in a newspaper where an actual editor like actually made the decision that, your feature was, truly good enough to be part of editorial, which you cannot purchase that. There's no amount of money that can buy that. So there is a watered down component to podcasts, but if you leverage them correctly, they definitely add credibility. But the biggest thing is that it does give potential clients, potential buyers, an opportunity, like you said, to check you out, to see your personality. I think, 20, whatever percentage of communication is nonverbal. And there's just so much that people can gain when they're evaluating you that goes beyond just a review or what you're saying on your website, to have a chance to kind of meet you or hear you and get a feel in their gut. Like, do I like this person? Do I trust this person? Are they credible? And, can I trust them? That goes a very long way, I think, in helping, the guest, wherever it is that they're on, because they're getting that additional visibility. And Definitely. Then on my end, I don't think people realize like how much work goes into doing a podcast, like the prep, the actual podcast, and then all the post that goes with it. It's a big commitment. And it's a lot of work that, and it's mutually beneficial, but definitely I would say if you want to get the advantages of being on a podcast, be a guest. Call Liz at Interview Valet. Be a guest. It is way less work, and you still get a lot of the same benefits than trying to have your own podcast. There was a lot of costs and time involved in actually doing the podcast. But if you want to have a podcast, you can give me a call, and I'll get you set up as a Brand Envy client. Liz, this has been excellent. How can people get a hold of you if they want to connect with you at Interview Valet?
Well, thanks, Nicole. You can find me. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I am linkedin.com/liz.g.brooks. There's, I think, 30 Liz Brookses on there last time I checked. So the G is important. G like golf.
I'll put the link in on the show notes.
And then you can also find me if you want to see more of the work that I do with Interview Valet. You can go to interviewvalet.com/Liz and find out more about the work that we do there as well.
Wonderful. Very good. Thank you so much, Liz, for having us.
Thank you, Nicole,
for being on.
We made it. We got there.
Yes, because we had to reschedule a few times because you were in the middle of your move to LA.
I was in the middle of my move, and then my dog got a tooth surgery, and but finally here we are.
Yes, we made it happen. Awesome, Liz. This has been so much fun.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Nicole.